Learning how to effectively place parameters, constraints, and dimensions in Autodesk Inventor can be difficult. One of the main aspects to keep in mind is capturing design intent. That is, building relationships into the geometry we place in our sketches. And while there's no substitute for spending time using the software and figuring it out for yourself, there's also a lot to be learned from watching someone else use the software as well. In this video, I will walk through the process of creating a part from scratch and talk through my thoughts on how to capture design intent efficiently. Welcome back to Practical AutoCAD and Inventor, your source for practical solutions to your problems with AutoCAD and Autodesk Inventor. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe so you will be notified whenever new videos are published. Also, if you have any questions you would like me to answer, please leave a comment below. Now, on with the video. As I stated before, capturing design intent includes placing parameters, that is, constraints and dimensions, in a way that you capture the intention of your design. In this picture, for example, there are several points of tangency between circles and arcs. For example, at the top there's this arc that becomes tangent to this line at that point right there. That tangent point is a constraint that you want to make sure that you have in your drawing. Additionally, there's a tangent point there, there's one over here, and so on all the way around. Other points that you might want to capture in your drawing are points of concentricity. For example, this arc and this circle have the same center. They have a concentric constraint. Same thing over here at this side. And then furthermore, you might want to have a horizontal relationship between, say, the center of this circle here and the center of this circle here, so that no matter what, those are always horizontal to each other. So I'm going to walk through the design of this part and try to show you how to capture some of that design intent. Now, before I get started, the way I'm going to design this part today has these holes here and here as sketched features. But in future videos, I will show you how to put those holes in as placed features, and we'll talk about why it's better to place in holes such as placed features rather than sketched features. So starting in Inventor, if I first of all come in here and look, this is our completed part. This is what it's going to look like when we get done. The Inventor will show that there is our line that is tangent to this arc, and it shows a line right there that is that edge saying, hey, this line is tangent to that arc. And we know that in real life that edge, that line wouldn't exist because it's a smooth transition, but it's just one of those things that Inventor puts in that shows us that we do have that condition that exists. There is a way that you can go in your visibility and you can change the view style so that you don't see that edge. Now, looking at our sketch here, when you create a sketch, you want to first start on the plane that is going to give you the view that you want. And because this example here, this is my front view, I'm going to start on the XY plane here. So when I come in here, I'm going to start on my XY plane because that will be my front view. After you have chosen your sketch plane, the next step is to project any geometry to the screen. Now, there's no geometry in this part yet. However, there is origin geometry. If I expand the origin over here in the history browser, you will see that there are several bits of origin geometry that we can use in our designs. There's the YZ plane, the XZ plane, the XY plane, X-axis, Y-axis, Z-axis, and the center point. There are times when you will want to project some of this geometry into your drawing and use it, and I'll demonstrate that today. Sometimes this geometry is related or is called orphan geometry because there's no parent that comes before it. It's just that orphan geometry, it's always existed in your drawing. Now, if we look at our example here, I know that I want the center of this circle here and the center of this circle here to have a horizontal relationship. Later on, I could come in and I could place a horizontal constraint between this center and this center, or one of the ways I could use this origin geometry is I could project it to the screen. To do that, I'm going to come up to my format and change my format to construction. What it allows me to do is to project geometry into my drawing as construction geometry. Construction geometry is just like other geometry, lines, circles, and so on, but the advantage of using construction geometry is that it's not considered in the final profile when you're doing another exercise such as creating an extrusion or a revolution. So I've turned construction geometry on. What I want to do is project geometry, and I'm simply going to come over to the x-axis in my history and click on it. And you'll notice that it projects that x-axis in here as a construction line. The construction line will have a dotted consistency so that it doesn't look like a regular line. Now that I've projected that into my drawing, I want to turn off that construction geometry, and now I can start sketching. When I sketch, I want to sketch my geometry approximately the right size and shape. So I'll start off with the big circle in the center, and it has a diameter of about 3.5. So I'll make it, again, approximately the right size and shape. Then over here on this side, there's a smaller circle, and then there's even a hole inside of it. Now, normally I would start right on the x-axis. And if you look right near the readout on the heads-up display, it's showing you that there is a constraint icon or a constraint being applied to it. It looks like a line with a little arrow on it, and it's saying, hey, I'm going to apply that coincident constraint. So if I click here and I make my arc approximately the right size, you'll notice that it puts in a little dot, okay? And if I show my constraints, right click and show my constraints, you'll see that there is actually a constraint there. And if I hover over that little coincident constraint, it's saying, look, that coincident constraint is, it makes that line, show up. So it's telling you what it's coincident with. So the center of this circle is coincident with that x-axis that I projected a little bit ago. If I press right click, I can hide those constraints. From here, I know that I need another circle that has that same center point. Again, notice on my heads-up display, it's also giving me that constraint saying, hey, it's going to be coincident. Those two circles are going to have the same center. But to show how you could do this otherwise, I'm going to pick a point that's obviously not in the center. Okay, so here I am. I've made this circle. Obviously, this center is not on that center, but I want those two to have the same center, so I could apply a concentric constraint. I want this circle and this circle to have the same center, so it moves the second circle to the first circle, since the first circle was already constrained on my x-axis. If I keep going, I know that I need a couple more circles down here, so I'll make them, again, approximately the right size and shape, and I'm going to get that same tangent constraint there, okay, or coincident constraint. And so now I've got things kind of going the right direction, the way I want them to go. Now I can start putting in some of my connecting geometry. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to show my constraints just so you can see what we have going as we're going on here. On this side over here, for example, I know that I want a line to go from about there to about here. Now, over here, I want it to actually have that. Notice that when I get to that point, it starts to imply that it's going to place a tangent constraint. I want to make sure that I get that tangent constraint. Do not pick that top quadrant of the circle, because then it creates a vertical relationship between the center of the circle and that point, and it will not let you have that tangent. So I'm going to move off until I get that tangent constraint. And notice that it applied the tangent constraint and that tangent constraint persisted, but it did not apply one over here. Okay, so I can do the same thing here. This time I'll start from here and I'll go back this direction. Again, I do not have the tangent constraint on the first point, but I do have it on the second point. It did persist over here. It did not persist over there. So just to make sure that I have those in there, I'll go ahead and apply that tangent constraint on both of those. So now I've got my tangent constraint on this side, I've got it on this side. I'm ready to keep going. So now over here, if we look at our sketch one more time, or our drawing, this is an arc that has a radius of 5, and this is an arc that has a radius of 1.5. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to begin by sketching it approximately the right size and shape and putting it in. Notice that when you use your arc, you pick your two endpoints first and then you put your radius in. A little bit different from how you would do it in AutoCAD. I do not have any of my tangent constraints at this point, so I'll go ahead and place them all in. I want this tangent with that. I want this tangent with that. I want this tangent with that. And I want this tangent with that. So now notice that I've got things kind of straightened out. I could also come in here and say, hey, you know what? I know that I want this arc and this arc to be equal, and I also want this arc and this arc to be equal. So now as I fix one, the other one's going to get fixed. Okay. So at this point, I don't really want this geometry or this geometry. I want to trim some of this out. But beware that when you trim geometry, sometimes you lose some of your constraints. So for example, if I come in here and I trim and trim and trim and trim, notice that most of my constraints stayed in place, but I lost right here, I lost a tangent constraint, and right here I lost a tangent constraint. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to put those back in, otherwise I might forget later. Okay. One other thing to consider is when I trimmed the edges of this circle out, it knows that this arc at the bottom still has the same center as this arc as the top, but it does not know anymore that those two are supposed to be the same size. So I could come in here and move this one, and notice that I could make the radius on this one smaller. So what you'll want to do is, again, add in that constraint so that now they are equal in size. To finish this sketch out, I'll add in another circle that has a radius of approximately 3, and then I need my polygon. It has 6 sides, and I'm purposely going to place it not horizontal so that I can demonstrate how to make this horizontal. My design intent is that this line right here is supposed to be horizontal, so I can either place that horizontal constraint on that line or between the center point and that corner point. Doesn't matter which one you choose, I'll simply pick that line right there. And now we are ready to place our dimensions. This model at this point is actually fairly stable, but if at some point you decide you need to add some more constraints, you can always add more constraints as you add dimensions as well. Because I don't want all of the constraints up while I'm dimensioning, I'm going to right-click my mouse and choose Hide Constraints. And now I can add my dimensions. I suggest that when you add your dimensions, you start with your larger dimensions first. So I'm going to go from the center of this circle to the center of this circle is supposed to be 5 5/8. And then from the center of this circle to the center of this circle, it's supposed to be 3. From the center here to the center here is 1 3/4. This arc has a radius of 5. Oh, this arc right here has a radius of 1 3/4. This one has a radius of 0.75. See how things can get kind of out of whack. That's why it's good to have your constraints in place. This one has a diameter of 3. And now from there to there is 1 3/4. And finally, my last dimension that I need to put in is this one here, 1 3/4. It says that I still need one dimension, and notice that there are some blue lines here on this. If I come in here and I try to deflect this somehow, it doesn't really want to let me, it doesn't recognize that this point and that point should be the same. So somehow when I place this, I forgot to get it right on the center point. So I'll just put in a coincident constraint between that center point and that center point, and now we are fully constrained. So it's very important to make sure that you have things fully constrained. If I undo that real quick, notice that originally it looked correct. From afar it looks correct, but there's some blue stuff in here. And so if you want to figure out what isn't fully constrained, one of the easiest way to do it is just to come in here and grab some of your geometry that's not the right color, click on it and hold and deflect it, drag it around to see what actually happens. And I can see that I can drag this back and forth. It won't go up or down, so it tells me that it's on that construction line that I put in there. That center point is coincident with that construction line that I put in earlier. So again, now that I know that this center point needs to have that center point, I can simply say I want this point to be coincident with that point, and it locks it all in. It's very important that you do make sure that you have your sketches fully constrained before you proceed. So now that we're ready to proceed, I'll say finish this sketch, press F6 to get out to my view here, and now I can extrude this. Now if we look at this, again, I want the boss on the front and the boss on the back to be the same size. So I'm going to do a symmetric extrusion, or a mid-plane extrusion, and I'm going to leave my sketch right in the middle. So I'll sketch the outer part 3/4, and then I will extrude the inner part 1 1/4, and I'll show you how to do that. So coming in here now, I go to extrude, and it says, okay, what do you want to extrude? But it does not automatically pick a profile because there's more than one profile. So rather than assume that I want to extrude one thing or another, it's waiting for me to tell it what I want to extrude. As I hover over the different profiles, you'll see that it highlights them and says, you know, do you want to extrude this, 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 whatever. I'm going to begin by extruding this part right here. It fills in a distance and it assumes a default direction. I'm going to change my distance here to 3/4, and then again the default direction has it going towards me. There are other options, like I could make it go the other direction, I could flip it the other direction, but again my design intent was to have that sketch right in the middle of this part, so I'm going to use this symmetric or mid-plane extrusion. Notice that the sketch is in the middle, half of it's coming forward, half of it's going back. When I choose OK, I end up with my sketch, or my part, constrained, or extruded. Now you might be thinking, whoa, I lost some of my geometry. You didn't lose your geometry, it's still there. If you go to your extrusion over here in the history, you can expand your extrusion and you can see sketch 1 is still there. And if I click on it, you'll see that that other geometry that I still want, it's still there. So in order to reuse this geometry, there's two things you can do. You can either share the sketch or turn the visibility on and then extrude one more time. In essence, they're the same thing. So if I right-click on sketch 1 and I choose Share Sketch, you'll see that the sketch shows up again. And now I can extrude. I can pick the second set of second profile that I want. I can say that I want it to be 1 1/4 inches this time. And when I say OK, now I've got my second extrusion, but I was able to embed all of my geometry into one sketch. Makes it a whole lot easier. Now that I'm done with my extrusions, however, I don't want to see that sketch anymore. So I'm going to come over here to sketch 1, right-click on it, and turn the visibility off. Notice, by the way, that sketch 1 is also the base for extrusion number 2, and now it appears above extrusion number 1, and it's got the little symbol here showing me that it's a shared sketch. But that's one sketch shared with two extrusions, and that's the way that you'll finish a simple project like this one.